So if you do have a question, I will endeavor to speak it back to you so that it is recorded as well. This morning we're talking about essentially the portfolio of services that the Army Enterprise Computing Office works on. We have a number of services related to the Army Data Center Consolidation Plan, including my office, which is the Army Application Migration Business Office. And the function of our office is to help migration for application owners throughout the Army to move to cloud service offerings or to DISA in order to help the Army to divest itself of the IT infrastructure that they've invested in and want to stop spending money on. So I'll begin with the Army Data Center Consolidation Plan support. That is an essential function of enterprise computing. We're an office within PEO EIS. Our office is the Enterprise Computing Office. My office is the Army Application Migration Business Office. So as many of you know, there have been a number of directives and policies that have been released by the Army in terms of consolidating data centers and migration of applications. Many of these policies initiated at the DoD level, beginning at the federal level with the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative. And then those policies flowed down from DoD and then down to the Army with the Army Data Center Consolidation Plan. Our office has supported the plan since its beginning with doing data center discovery, producing reports, making recommendations for consolidation on the local installation, and then later for consolidation by migrating applications out off of the installation themselves. We are focused on migrating enterprise applications. That is defined as applications where the users or data is transferred outside the installation boundary. So of those policies, there are a number of them. They've been released since since 2011. Most recently, we had the Undersecretary of the Army's memo standing up our office, the Army Application Migration Business Office. Now, what our office does is we track migrations from the origin environment to the target environment based on technical analysis of an application to find a suitable environment off-premise. Several other policies around that have been released since then. Guidance for how to use commercial cloud computing, guidance for there's a ConOps that was released by our cyber for how to protect workloads in commercial cloud. So there's a number of policies that have been released. We're still awaiting some more, but our movement to cloud is in progress. So at a very high level, these are the roles and responsibilities that govern migration. With DISA, CIOG6, PLEC, our office, Enterprise Computing, and the mission owner all working together to ensure that the migration happens in a repeatable and supportable way that we can share across the Army. DISA provides both infrastructure in the form of the DISA DEX and in MilCloud. They also provide the cloud access point for commercial cloud service offerings that are authorized to host data that's at a more sensitive level. They also provide an interface between the DODIN and the commercial networks. CIOG6 establishes and enforces the policy governing application migration and data center consolidation. They own the ADCCP mission. We support them with it. And they review rationalization recommendations and cost-benefit analyses that are conducted by the application owners, and then up through the governance, which includes the commands, the domains, and the mission areas. PLEC, that's enterprise computing. Like I said earlier, we're an office within PEOEIS under ASALT. Our office, the AMBO office, we're the single point of contact for migration. So we want to make sure that we are tracking migrations no matter what the destination is. We want to know where our applications are moving. It helps us to make recommendations in order to start consolidating services, to make recommendations for cost savings, and to make recommendations for optimizing across the Army enterprise. So we are also the liaison between the mission owner and the target environment, and we recommend the best hosting solution for a particular application or suite of applications through engineering analysis. We're also working on the Accent contract. The Accent contract is a BOA, a basic ordering agreement. The intention is to make sure that all of the DoD provisionally authorized cloud service offerings are available for Army mission owners to use in a way that's compliant with DoD's requirements for cloud contracting. The mission owner, the bulk of the work falls on the mission owner. The bulk of the work and all of the funding for migration falls on the mission owner. They will support rationalization by providing information to the commands, the domains, and the mission areas about their application, the user base, and the functionality, whether it'll be consumed by a larger ERP, whether it's intended to be sustained, or whether it should be killed. They provide the funding for everything, including modernization to get to a cloud-ready architecture prior to migration. They develop the cost-benefit analysis. The intention is to get us closer to understanding what the total cost of ownership for an application is. Unfortunately, the way we've always kind of grown applications organically based on an immediate need. And the Army has some really talented people that are able to build applications that meet a mission function, but they haven't actually been through a requirements generation process. They haven't necessarily been through any kind of ATO or authorization to operate. Because of that, we're kind of backtracking and getting a feel for what the Army's inventory of applications truly is. And that's a lot of the rationalization effort. They want to make sure that mission owners are using their existing resources. There's no additional funding provided for migration and modernization support. The expectation is that through divesting ourselves of the infrastructure that's hosting these applications, we'll achieve cost savings that can then be used to modernize and to migrate. And they will also develop and execute the migration plan to the target environment. Now, selection of the target environment is up to the mission owner themselves. As the funding organization, they get to decide where it is that they're going to go. But we will let them know which environments are eligible to host those applications. There's considerations for security. There's considerations for the technical infrastructure. We want to make sure that we're advising appropriately. So do you have a question?
Sure. Does someone validate that cost-benefit analysis?
Yes. So the cost-benefit analysis is generated by the mission owner. The question was about, do we validate the cost-benefit analysis? Does someone validate the cost-benefit analysis? The cost-benefit analysis is generated by the mission owner, needs to be submitted for approval using the tools that exist already through DASA CE. So that's the office that actually, I think it's cost and economics. Correct. So it's DASA CE. They validate the cost-benefit analyses, and there's an approval generated. Now, the CIOG6 also must be able to view those cost-benefit analyses. There is no Army-wide CBA. So AMBO. You may have heard of AMBO, but you may not be familiar with what it means. It's the Army Application Migration Business Office. That is my office. We have a 6-phase process where we assist application owners with determining what their requirements will be, helping them to select a target environment, and then tracking their migration through to the end state. Our office primarily works in these first 3 phases. The remainder of the phases, mostly tracking and reporting. But it is essential that migrations happen with our visibility because we are the Army's office for knowing where applications end up. So we have a team of systems and application engineers, of cloud experts and cybersecurity experts that are able to provide really good advice to a mission owner to let them know what their options are for migration. We do some data collection, we do an analysis of the technical requirements of an application, and then we make a recommendation for a target environment that's suitable. We also provide some data that's used in the cost-benefit analysis in the form of a rough order of magnitude for hosting in the target environment compared with hosting in DISA, in hosting in MilCloud for those applications that can move there, in the DEC, in the commercial cloud service offerings, and for the Army Enterprise data centers. And then we assist with planning by providing some templates and some guidance for how to plan for your migration to ensure that your interfaces remain functional, that your ports are addressed, that you've registered your ports, and we just kind of guide a migration through that process. So we also have a team of systems engineers that are dedicated to the larger enterprise effort overall. That's the systems engineering group within PLEC. So they have 2 main tasks at the moment, and that's for the common services piece. So when we talk about common services, we're talking about those services that are typically provided by the hosting environment. Usually their origin environment is a on-premise data center that's operated by the Army. We want to make sure that we have taken account of all of the services that are being consumed by an application or suite of applications, and that those services will be available in the target environment as well. What we don't want to do is we don't want application owners to go out and build a virtual data center with all the services around it in order to replicate what they're getting from their current environment. We want to make sure that we're designing those services so that they're available across the enterprise, no matter what your target environment. So our systems engineering group is working on developing some methods for Netcom, who will be the operator and maintainer of those services, no matter where they are. They're also working on the data center optimization and consolidation. So I did mention very, very briefly about the Army Enterprise Data Center concept. Mr. Bognar, who's here joining me, is the chief of the ADCCP division for CIO G6. He will talk more about data center consolidation and go into a little more detail about the Army Enterprise data centers. But we also want to make sure that we're synchronized so that the services are made available through all of the enduring data centers and also in cloud environments. So very briefly, this is what we're looking at in terms of the common services planning. The services that you see over on the right, we've determined that these are the most commonly consumed services by applications that are hosted in the Army's data centers now. We did that through the applications that have come through our office for migration planning. We want to make sure that we've acknowledged the services that they need and that we're addressing the most frequently required services first in those new environments. So the systems engineering plan is intended to begin a Army Cloud Services broker role to make sure that those requirements are met no matter what the target environment. And to make sure that they are deployed on a schedule and to the correct environments at the target. And we want to make sure that they're included in an ITSM-based services catalog to which an application owner can subscribe. And we want to standardize SLAs, service desk, and use continual service improvement methodologies to make sure that we're providing the correct services at the right level to application owners as they're needed. Sir, you had a question? So migration right now is through the secret level. We're planning for migrations through secret. We don't have any top secret applications that we're working on. And then when we're talking about cloud service offerings, the DISA Security Requirements Guide only addresses up to secret. That would be Cloud Impact Level 6. So for this section of the presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bognar. This is today's typical data center environment. Oh. Yes, sir. So what I would recommend is that you visit the RFP that's out, or the draft RFP that's out on FedBizOps for information about the structure for it.
Oh, good morning. It's great to be here. I'd like to be able to share with you some information today about the Army's data center consolidation efforts. The short time that we do have, I want to be able to talk about the data center consolidation challenge that we do face, a little bit of background behind why we had those challenges and what's driving the challenges. I want to talk to you also a little bit about where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going to with data center consolidation in the Army, and particularly how we're trying to aim towards data center end state by the end of FY25. And then as I go along here, I want to talk a little bit intermixed about the upcoming Secretary of the Army directive that resets Army's accountability for data center consolidation and will drive us homewards to the data center end state. So let's dive into the challenge that this slide shows over here. Bottom line up front, I think probably many of us from here that are associated with the Army understand that the Army has a very unwieldy data center and application footprint. What I show here is a depiction of Redstone Army Arsenal and its data center formation. I'm not picking on Redstone because actually this slide is typical or depicts what is typical across many Army installations. And what we have out here at Redstone are 23 data centers owned by 16 commands. Now, among the 23 data centers, we have what we call 11 installation processing nodes, or IPNs, and 12 special purpose processing nodes, or SPPNs. IPNs and SPPNs, those are Joint Information Environment terms, but we do use them in the Army as well when we talk about data center consolidation efforts. To rehash something what Johanna mentioned about applications and data centers in these terms, IPNs, by definition, host only local applications, and that is applications that don't cross installation lines, if you will. But we know today many of our IPNs are currently hosting enterprise applications as well. That is applications that do cross installation lines. And we have that unders memo that tells us to migrate those enterprise applications to enterprise hosting environments, including the cloud. Then we have those SPPNs out there, which are, as the name implies, are special. They provide unique mission support to various commands doing different things. I actually classify SPPNs under 14 different categories. For example, a flight simulator would be an SPPN because it has a server associated with that. You have a laboratory and have a service associated with that. You have a test and dev community server farm that may be associated with that. So those are SPPNs. And as I talk today, a lot of my emphasis is going to be on the IPN family because that's where the main data and storage power is with the Army, and that's what we have to get rid of in order to meet some of the intents and mandates issued by the federal government DoD. So if you look at these data centers that we have right now, we can see that we have a very decentralized structure. And because they're decentralized, that means they're non-standardized. In addition, many of these data centers are underutilized. In our analysis, we believe that on average, a typical data center, your brick and mortar data center even, is operating about 30% utilization. From the application side of the house, as Johanna also mentioned, many of the applications are custom built. Some have actually been built to operate in a particular data center environment. They're not modernized. A lot of them have a poor code, depend upon what I call ancient operating systems. And so they're not secure. They're not virtualized. And the biggest problem probably of all is they're very redundant. Many applications are out there in these data centers doing the same thing, but just under a different guise. So what we have here is an environment that's very inefficient and very costly to operate, particularly in terms of application O&M. But I think even if we dispel all that, one of the biggest problems we have is we have a very large cyber attack surface with all this stuff out there. Those data centers and all those applications in the data centers, each one pose a means for the enemy to exploit us and to create an attack against our network. So we have to really be careful and reduce the size so we can manage the network better in terms of cyber defenses. I think, though, the bottom line for me on this slide is that the way we currently have formations or data center formations on Army installations is that we cannot achieve the Army's vision. And the Army's vision is very simple. We want to be able to ensure that any soldier can get to any application at anywhere at any time. And with this construct here, we can't do that. So we have to change our whole paradigm. And we have to ensure that we look at now, instead of treating data centers as being proprietary, sole ownership by commands, that instead they look at it as a data center being a commodity. We have to look at, as Johanna mentioned, not trying to buy hardware and infrastructure for data centers. We need to divest ourselves of that hardware, of the infrastructure, and we need to go to IT services such as the commercial cloud. And I think the biggest message here is that we have to change our mentality about being both server huggers and application huggers. We have to look towards being a centralized enterprise construct in the Army so we can truly deliver the bang for the buck for the warfighter. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. I'm going to skip over many of the points here, but I do want to call out a few things. Johanna already gave you a brief history, but I do want to highlight some more details about the FDCCI initiative that was sent out by OMB in 2010. And that directive really matches what we're trying to accomplish here as well. We're trying to, again, improve efficiencies, improve security, and reduce costs in terms of data centers. Now, the FDCCI, the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative, said to close 40% of federal government data centers by the end of FY18. DoD upped up that ante and said we're going to close 60% of our data centers by the end of FY18, and we're still under that mandate to do that. The key thing, though, is that what is a data center as defined by OMB? So the definition has changed over time. Initially, when the FDCCI came out, the data center was 1,000 square feet. Now it's less than it was 500 square feet, and now essentially a single server, if it stores and processes data, is a data center. On this chart here, I want to show to you the impacts of that definition. I also want to show to you where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going to with data center consolidation efforts. Now, you can see that between 2010 and 2015, we had a really exponential growth in data center counts in our baseline inventory. But again, this is not based upon physical growth, if you will, of data centers, but based upon the changing OMB definitions. So as we began to count those one eaches in closets, our data center inventory began to grow exponentially. 2010, we were counting 248 data centers, and now by at the end of 15, we were counting 1,300 plus. Now in 16, we took a small dip in data centers, our count, by about 60 or so because we were no longer required by DoD to count what we call installation service nodes, ISNs. Those are parts of a data center or the standalone comm nodes that support your networks, like your switches and your routers. They don't count as data centers. Only things that store and process data count as data centers. So as of today, we have to close 752 data centers in order to meet that 60% goal mandated by DoD. As of this morning, we have closed, an update on the slide here, we have closed 406 data centers. That means we still have about 350 or so to go in the next couple of years. And on top of that, the DoD mandates not only to close 60%, but also by the end of FY18 to get down to 1 IPN per Army installation. And that's a challenge unto itself as well. As we go more towards the right of the chart, you can see that as we get to FY25, we're going to significantly reduce the number of data centers in the Army. And what this really shows is a decline in IPNs, because again, IPNs are your big money producing, if you will, or most costly data centers. We're going to be shutting down SPPNs, but not as many. We will still probably have, in the end, about 400 SPPNs out there for the Army. But in the end, for IPNs, we will probably have about 10 global, what we call Army Enterprise Data Centers. Army Enterprise Data Centers are a unique category of IPNs that they can not only host local applications, but they can also host enterprise applications. And I'll touch upon their importance in just a few minutes on another slide. But we are going to get rid of data centers. We are going to divest ourselves of infrastructure, and we are going to have to make this work as an Army team. So let's talk a little bit about that, about the way ahead to get to that end state. I think the meat behind the end state right now is the up-and-coming Secretary of the Army directive. Right now, that directive is sitting in the Secretary of the Army's office. We're waiting for his signature on it. But that directive, as the name implies, is very directive. It has an implementation plan for closing data centers and for migrating applications to enterprise hosting environments. In terms of data center consolidation, that plan has Enclosure 3. Enclosure 3 has Tabs A and Tab B. Tab A is what we call the Data Center End State Basis of Issue Plan. That Basis of Issue Plan tells each Army installation what type of data center, for example, IPN, SPPN, and how many of those they can have on that installation by the end of FY25. Tab B shows what data centers by command, by FY, by quarter must be closed in order to reach that end state. Now, backing up that implementation plan is a hefty piece of new governance being added also within the directive. The directive forms a Army GOSCS Council, the Migration Implementation Review Council, which ensures that the Army will comply with data center consolidation efforts. It will track all the specified tasks in the directive. It will track the implementation schedules and timelines and ensure that we don't digress from that. Now, there will be a means for commands to ask, if you will, for reclamas not to close at certain times, but it must come through the MIRC, the Migration Implementation Review Council, in order to get approval. Ultimately, the MIRC is going to report to the chair of the Army Enterprise Network Council, who in turn will report status to the Senior Resource Group, which is, of course, chaired by the Secretary of the Army. So there's some serious governance put into the directive as well to ensure that we don't deviate. Let me kind of backtrack a second about where we stand right now with consolidations. So up through 14, we were doing pretty well. But from 15 onwards, we started to really take a big slide. In 15, we wanted to close 130 data centers. We closed 71. In 16, we want to close 140. To date, we've closed 20. So we're really slipping right now. And I think the answer is simple. Prior to 15, we got all the low-hanging fruit. We got all the data centers nobody wanted anyways. But now, we got the data centers everybody wants to hang on to, the ones they're hugging on to and say, hey, this is my baby here, don't touch it. So we have to work hard now to influence the fight. And again, the governance body is going to help with that. Again, a lot of hard work here. And not only that, but most of the data centers we have closed, a little transparent here, have been small data centers. That is 5 servers or less. So we haven't hit those heavy brick and mortar facilities. Again, you can imagine why. This is very precious to our commands out there. And we're going to have to begin to whittle those down as we engage in this fight here. Yes? Right. So MilCon is an issue in some locations. But I would say the biggest problem right now for trying to migrate applications out of legacy data centers is that we being the Army, have not provided the owners with a good place to land them yet because of difficulties. Case in point, going to the commercial cloud. It's out there. We're ready to do it. But we have issues with some security constraints that we have to work through. And we have, as Johanna mentioned, we have got to work through these common services issues, how we're going to provide in the cloud. We're getting very, very close, and that will help trigger a massive movement out of these data centers into the cloud. So in fairness to, you're right, Don. So in fairness to the data center owners, the Army has not provided the ability for them to move sometimes out of these legacy data centers. Of course, there's always the DISA-DEC, but you know what they say about DISA-DECs? I can't afford it, okay? And Johanna's team, when they do the analysis, it pretty much indicates that they can't afford it, all right? So we're stuck. But that's why, and I'll give the plug now. I won't wait for the slide. That's why we're creating these Army Enterprise Data Centers as part of the end state. But they're coming online now as part of the directive. So in CONUS, we're going to have 4 Army Enterprise Data Centers: Bragg, Knox, Redstone, and Carson. They can begin to receive applications from across the Army almost immediately. So we're trying to provide a relief valve, if you will, through these enterprise data centers here. So that's one of the main reasons why we're trying to get that in the directive as soon as possible. Now, will all the ADCs be able to bring applications immediately online? Probably not. But there are some that can probably bring it on sooner than later as we wait for the cloud to open up. But I still think we're going to see this nexus of things happening somewhat time in FY17, where all the pieces are going to fall together, and we're going to see this explosion of effort going on here. Yes, sir. Yeah, that absolutely. So we're looking at different models right now for that. One might be having Netcom take over, but Netcom takes over, maybe we can't reduce costs. But if we take these 4 ADCs and compete them against each other and try to drive down costs more, yes, we think we can drive down costs even better for the customer. But we want our ADCs to be competitive regardless, and we want to be competitive against the commercial market and against DISA, which isn't too hard to do right now, okay, in terms of DISA. But again, in all fairness, when DISA charges rates, they charge fully burdened rates. When Army Data Center charges rates, they actually subsidize the customer quite a bit. A lot of the funding is provided from the data center fund themselves that the customer never pays. And the customer doesn't pay for electricity because that's paid by the installation guys and so forth. So yeah, I guess if you really balance the books, we might be pretty close in terms of what we pay for data center usage between DISA and the Army. Yes, sir.
Who owns these 4 ADCs?
Good question. So it's a mixture. So at a Knox, you have it's command owned by HRC. At Bragg, you have Netcom, USARC, and Forcecom that owned parts of that data center. And then at Carson and at Redstone, it is Netcom owned. So as you see, we have a challenge. We have to try to bring together these different commands and ensure that we create a standardized approach to how we implement the AEDCs. And once you get a copy of the directive, you will see that there are specified tasks for a wide variety of Army organizations to ensure we do that synchronization effort and to drive down those costs for hosting applications in the AEDCs. By the way, we're going to have 6 AEDCs also in CONUS, but my talk today really is focusing on the CONUS side of the house. Question over here? It would be. I think we're still working through that. The intent would be to make it a truly reimbursable type of model here, I believe, where you'd advertise services in the catalog. The customer says, "I want these services. And I'm going to pay for whatever I ask for." That would be the intent, I believe. Now, will we? I can't say that's golden right now. We may look at some other models, but I think that's the actual intent, and that way, I think we can drive down costs the best. All right, so in terms of the actual getting to the end state, there's 3 phases. We're already in phase 1. Phase 1 runs from FY16 through the end of FY18, and here our sole goal is to meet the DoD intent of closing 60% of our data centers and getting one IPN for each installation. Now, if we're successful with that, by the end of FY18, we'll still have about 200 IPNs. And again, I'm going to talk IPNs, not SPPNs here. We'll still have about 200 IPNs in our inventory, so we got to whittle it down more. So in phase 2, we've identified the top 40 data centers in the Army that provide support to 95% of our customers. Now, those top 40 also align with the MPLS and JRSS efforts that are ongoing as well. So we'll take those 200 IPNs and shrink them down into those 40 IPNs. Actually, 38 out of the 40, because 2 of those IPNs are standalone, the Pentagon and Site R, and we're not going to collapse anything into those 2 standalones. So out of the top 40, we're going to collapse these 200 or so into the 38. Then as we go into phase 3, we're going to take those 38 and can collapse them into the 4 AEDCs. Now let me show you the next slide that makes it a little more clear for you. So again, this shows about between phase 2 and phase 3, how we've collapsed down to 38 data centers, and then how we collapsed down to the 4 AEDCs. So for example, at Knox, you would have, for example, Campbell and McCoy collapse into Fort Knox. So this means at the very end then that we're going to have a small data center formation for IPNs across the Army. Now, there will still be Army National Guard state-owned data centers out there because they're under a different title. And I will tell you, we'll probably have about 5 or 6 outlying IPNs that are very unique based upon mission or landmass. So, for example, Kwajalein Atoll will have to retain an IPN. The detention barracks at Leavenworth, because of some of their unique processing requirements, will probably retain an IPN, but that will be a very small handful. The bottom line is we're going to dramatically shrink our IPN count, and at the same time, we'll continue to shrink down the SPPN count as well, but that's not the main focus right now. Yes, sir.
You say what, the Pentagon and Site R already, right?
Yes, again, those are standalone. We're not going to collapse anything into those data centers. Okay?
And they're not going to move either.
Exactly. Right, yeah, I'm not touching those babies. As a matter of fact, Pentagon's out of my hands anyway. It's JSP now, so the ITA is going bye-bye. So it's really out of my hands anyways. But actually, we're trying to get out of the Pentagon, to be honest with you. Okay, we have a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there, and we can put in the commercial cloud when it's opened up. Yes. Yeah, so that's a great question. I think some data centers are better than others. I think probably Carson and Knox could probably begin to bring a few things on. But you're right. Part of the plan that we have to look at, and is dictated by the directive, is to figure out how do we onboard and how do we add that additional compute powers required to facilitate that. So more needs to be thought about that. But great question. Yes, sir. Oh, those just show the number of IP. It's a total count of IPNs, ISNs, and SPPNs at that location right now. Yes. All right. So real briefly, I really touched a lot of this already on the directive, but I do want to highlight a few more points. The whole genesis of the SA directive was to really patch up the UNDERS memo. We weren't going to actually do a directive. We were just going to revise the UNDERS memo that Johanna talked about that established AMBO and that said that, hey, Army, you got to move enterprise applications to a core data center. At that time, the only thing available to migrate to enterprise-wide was a core data center. Because we had more opportunities, for example, the commercial cloud, we wanted to update that memo to make it more inclusive so the Army would understand they can go to the cloud. But as we began to do this, we got guidance from Army leadership that, hey, we're falling behind data center closures. We're not doing well in application migrations. We're not doing well in application rationalization. We need more power, and so we want a directive signed by the Secretary of the Army, and that's what we're getting right now. But I think it's a good thing. The directive actually has some significant improvements, and again, it compels compliance, unlike the memo which simply suggested compliance. Just some more key highlights about the directive. It takes a very holistic approach. The memo looked at really only trying to get these applications to a CDC. It didn't think anything about closing down data centers. But the directive ties in application migrations and rationalizations along with data center consolidation because there's a nexus. As we just talked about, you can't close data centers unless you migrate the applications out of them and vice versa. So the directive takes into account and makes sure that both are equally treated. The directive also, again, creates a, what would I would say, because it has an implementation plan, it creates a very definitive way of approaching the problem. There are specified tasks, coordinating instructions, specified timelines and schedules that the MERC, this governance body, is going to enforce to make sure that we are able to execute our duties properly. And the SEC Army Directive actually, again, identifies the 4 CONUS-based Army Enterprise data centers. Now, OCONUS-wise, we're looking at 2 in Germany, 2 in Korea, 1 in Japan, and 1 in Hawaii. And we're still fleshing that out, but that's why we have not named them specifically in the directive at this time. I'm sure in the near future we'll do an update to that directive as well. So the bottom line, we're going forward. We're under mandate by the federal government, by DOD, and the Army itself says we have to close data centers. It's a big hot item because a lot of people see in a very fiscally-constrained environment an opportunity here to take these dollars that we're spending on data centers and applications in those data centers and putting them to better use. And I think they're right. We are going to have to take the opportunity to really take a hard look as an Army and say we're going to make this happen here. This is very, very difficult work. Technically, we'll get over all the hurdles, but it's the cultural barriers, the political barriers that we have to work on adjusting, if you will. But truly, I consider this one of the biggest transformational efforts that the Army, at least in terms of IT, has undergone in 100 years. And it's really equivalent to our moonshot, if you will. And so, like John Kennedy said, we choose to do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard, but because we know there are many rewards associated with it. And we've got to do it. We've got to do it for the sake of our soldiers so we can get to that vision. Remember, any soldier getting to any application at any time, at any place. And we can do that if we focus on going to the enterprise and if we focus on becoming a unified Army team in this effort here. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
The arguments for the cost efficiencies are pretty clear. They're easy to make. But looking at it from a risk perspective, has anybody produced any documents about, okay, as we collapse down from hundreds to 4, yeah, we reduce our attack surface, but
Right.
also
Yeah. So
a lot of choke points.
So we've had a lot of discussions with the cybersecurity side of the house, the cyber director at G6. There's a mixed bag of thought. You can look at it one way or another. You can say, yeah, if I collapse down to 4, I make easier targets because I only have 4 to attack. But others say, yeah, but you can dig a bigger moat around those 4 and defend it easier. So there is no clear, I think, adjudication on which is a better course of action.
Or is there documentation about the analysis?
I don't know. I have to check with our cyber director for that. And if you want, I can help you out via email. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Kind of on the same line of thought, typical commercial practice is to have cloud centers and data centers mirroring to have redundant capability
Yes.
when ones go down.
Yes.
Have you got that taken care of also?
Yeah. So I got to tell you one more part of the strategy here that probably the very last part of the end state to help answer that question here. So yes, in the immediate fight, what we envision is probably these ADCs grouping to one another, DNR to one another. Okay, but in the very end, and we're marching onwards with that. We're going to take those 4 ADCs, and they're not going to be data centers any longer. They're going to form the Army Private Cloud Enterprise. It's going to be an on-premises, commercially owned, contractor-owned and commercial cloud, contractor-owned and operated type of setup here. So again, we're going to divest ourselves completely of the data center business. We're going to buy a service. We're going to buy cloud services. Right now at Redstone, we're starting the pilot there for the Army Private Cloud Enterprise. The contract contract source selection team just met. They're wrapping that up. So the contract for the pilot is probably going to be let out by the end of September. And we're going to see if we can do a COCO model, contractor-owned, contractor-operated model, on a data center in the cloud construct on premises. Why on premises? What we do on premises, we can get up to level 6. We don't have to use a cap, and we already have the common services in place. So it's a lot easier to do on premises for the Army. All right. So those impact level 5 to 6 applications. It's a great place to put them on installation. Impact level 4 and impact level 2, we'd probably want to go off premises in the cloud with those. So yeah, we're thinking about how to tie those pieces together, and we're thinking more bigger though. Let the vendor worry about that problem for us as you buy a service from them. Okay. Yes.
You used a couple of words, massive and explosive.
Yes.
About the migration.
Bam.
Couldn't agree more. My question is, I guess this is Ms. Curry as well.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to your role in terms of governance and approving the migration or certifying that it's the right answer, I mean, do you really have the engineering staff and team that you need to keep this moving along?
So we don't execute the migration, so
Correct.
like I said earlier, correct? So I believe that there will be plenty of opportunity for migration execution services that application owners and commands can use to move their applications to the target environment, right? Again, it's up to the command or the mission owner to know or to make a decision about what the target environment is. Our role is advisory. We track the business of migration, not the actual doing of migration, right? So I believe that there'd be
Yeah.
plenty of opportunity for providing assistance to these mission owners because
Right.
moving to cloud is new for the Army, right? It's just new. And I want to make sure that, our partners that are in the cloud services business, I want to make sure that you know that of the applications that we've seen, and we've got hundreds in the queue that are ready to migrate, at least 70% of them are impact level 4. So as Mr. Bognar mentioned, impact levels 5 and 6, those ones that have, special security implications of the data that's in those applications, those need to be hosted on premises. But the vast majority of applications that we're seeing fall within the range of impact level 4, which means that it's not public-facing data. It needs to be controlled, but we do have opportunities to move those to commercial cloud as well. And that's really what we're targeting, commercial cloud services for those applications, because it is the bulk. It allows us to reduce our computing infrastructure in a big way, and allows us to focus the defense of the impact level 5 and 6 onto the on-premise cloud.
And if you're, I just want to add on to that. If you're talking about throughput through AMBO, they can handle that workload. To date, yes. But I will tell you, and AMBO this will tell you, they've never been totally tested yet. But since I fund AMBO, and since I'm only funding that 25% right now, they've been doing a great job. So we can always up the ante, if you will, by increasing those resources. All right? Now, again, I always believe in full transparency. In the SA directive that we have out there, we have provided a means for army organizations to bypass AMBO if, under 2 conditions. One, if they meet all standards published by ASALT for doing AMBO-type functions, as Johanna described earlier. And 2, they have to request permission from the CIOG-6 to do that. I anticipate there will not be many commands that want to embark on AMBO-type functions or AMBO-like functions. Although we do have some major commands or ACOMs that may very well try to do that because they do have the resource capability. But by and large, I believe AMBO is going to provide great support. And let me tell you what, when you get the detailed brief from AMBO and their engineers, you say you want to go through AMBO because they have a very meticulous process. I'm a big proponent of AMBO, they are truly doing great things for the Army. Get your applications through AMBO, and you will get the best answers for yourself and what you want to do for your applications. Yes, Don.
Yes, I have 2 questions. The first one is, so based
That,
Or is
that
that something?
no, that's something different. But is if you look at the task to Second Army in the Secretary of the Army Directive, we do touch upon that. We have to create some way of governing in the cloud itself as well, and that's NetCon's responsibility to develop a means of doing that. Okay, so they owe us a plan, and there's I think it's within 180 days after starting the directive, or 90 days, that they have to provide a plan for how they're going to manage that in the cloud. Okay, you get this my lookalike here, though.
Yeah, Tom Conti with
Hey,
Hewlett
Tom.
Packard Enterprise. And Joanne, I want to thank you very much for answering that last question, putting in perspective exactly what the Ambo office does. As you flow down the critical path and delivering the services to the customer,
Yeah.
what type of thinking is being given to spreading the wealth, if you will, and taking advantage of the skill set of small businesses in this
Yeah.
space? I know you're going to be
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
existing contracts, but if you look at the BOA TO that you
Right.
produced with the accent agreement, it's not clear.
Yeah.
And it just appears that this is explosive, large. I'd like your color on this if possible.
Okay. So what we'd like to do is, in order to address concerns from not having a direct contractual relationship with the actual cloud service provider, because we buy many services through resellers with whom we have contracts, we want to make sure that the actual CSP is a party to that agreement as well. So many of these contracts and many of these requests for services will be through teaming, right? We want to make sure that we've addressed the requirement to team with small businesses, to make sure that all parties are parties to that contract. So there is accountability for the data, for being able to access our information, even if the contract with the reseller terminates. So we do want to encourage teaming and partnering and resellers to provide those services to us. But because we have to make sure that the CSP is also accountable to the contract holder as well, that's why we're doing the BOA at the task order level with the actual CSP.
Will your materials be available?
Say again.
Will your briefing materials be available?
Yes,
Sure,
they're
yeah.
on the
Yeah.
Afcea TechNet office website.
Thank you.
And you can always contact me too as well. I'll be glad to help you in any way I can.
Say your name again.
It's Attila. Okay? It truly is Attila. All the ladies call me Hun. It's Attila, Attila, .j, .bognar, BOGNAR, at mail.mil. Okay. Oh, sorry, thank you. Attila.j.bognar.civ at mail.mil. Right. Yes, sir.
Specific question on your common services.
Yes.
So I have a DOJ background, so I'm new to defense. But having done 2 FedRAMs for DOJ, what I've not seen is the common cyber services, especially when you move to the commercial cloud.
Yes.
Right.
Are you
Right.
planning to offer that to the customers,
Yes.
like common patch management
Yep.
or reporting service?
No, great question. Great question. And the CIOG6 holding tight, saying, hey, commands, it's all on you to fund this. Okay? And by the way, this is my pet peeve. We've been at this for almost 6 years, and many commands have yet to do anything in the palm for this effort. So my compassion for them is not that high right now. Again, I'm an honest guy.
So we're at about 9 o'clock. I'm not sure if there's a follow-on session for this room. I don't know if this room is being used afterward. I do want to make sure that I'm answering all of your questions about AMBO and about how we're helping to migration to cloud, because I know that's why so many of you are here. I'm sure Mr. Bogner wouldn't mind staying around a little more to talk about data center consolidation. But I did want to let you know that 16 minutes to get your credits, that's up, and you can get some.